So something that a lot of people, including politicians, can collectively agree on is these threats by Donald Trump of adding on 25% tariffs to Canada, and who cares about Mexico? Sorry, but not sorry. To Canada, it all boils down to Justin Trudeau's fault. He has let this country go to absolute trash. Drugs everywhere in the streets, crime, his fault. Terrorists coming here to Canada, abusing our immigration system, abusing our refugee system, coming here, setting up base, growing their numbers of population, and then either trying to commit acts of terrorism here within our borders or going over to America. And that's why Donald Trump is saying, yeah, no, fix this or 25% tax. And everyone's going, whoa, what's going on? What's going on? Now, some analysts are saying, hey, but that's not Trudeau's fault. This is just something that we've had an issue with. Yeah, 9 years of Trudeau. Come on. What do you mean? 9 years? And you got us to the point of absolute horrible policies, horrible everything. And then that's why Donald Trump is trying to impose these 25% tariffs. So Danielle Smith talks to Vashi one-on-one, CTV, right? And she says, yeah, no, this is Trudeau's fault, and he's got to take accountability, and he better fix this. This is going to hurt a lot of people, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans, a lot of Americans living in Canada. So we're going to take a look at that, but first we're going to take a look at what is going on with Australian news, mate. They seem to have a problem down under with Justin Trudeau. Let's start things off there, but not before you take the time now to smash the like button and subscribe, mate. It goes a far way. Now let's go.
Canadian opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has called out Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, over his rolling creating and tolerating anti-Semitism in Canada. The left-wing hate there is fueling riots in Montreal. I'll just quote from what Pierre wrote on X. He said, "You act surprised. We are reaping what you sowed. This is what happens when a Prime Minister spends 9 years pushing toxic woke identity politics, dividing and subdividing people by race, gender, vaccine status, religion, region, age, wealth, saying Canada is a post-national state with no core identity. And while you were dancing, Montreal was burning. We won't let you divide us anymore. Call an election and now. We will fire you and reclaim our citizenship, our values, our lives, our freedom, and most of all, our country." Wow, Josh, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's a fiery statement, and it's a fiery statement that has to be made. I mean, frankly, I was looking at the so-called ratio on the underlying tweet that Justin Trudeau pointed out, that we saw kind of the quote there. I mean, Justin Trudeau was getting so-called ratioed. I mean, he was getting just blown up in the replies there. I mean, Trudeau is going to get demolished the next time that he actually bothers to hold an election there in Canada there. And it's because his policies have fundamentally failed. By the way, it's not just that he's allowing Jew haters in Montreal to firebomb synagogues. He's also now on record as saying that he looks forward to enforcing the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as if yes. Netanyahu were to visit Ottawa. I mean, is Trudeau literally going to send in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to round up the Jews? I mean, are you kidding me here? I mean, is this sort of Nazi-esque rounding up the Jews the progressive mentality in the year 2024? I guess the answer apparently is yes. Again, he's going to get his clock cleaned in Canada the next time that they bother to host elections there. This leader of the opposition of the Tories is very, very, very well spoken. I hope he gets back into power the next time that Canada bothers to hold a national election, frankly.
I do like his form. He reminds me a lot of Ron DeSantis.
It is extremely sad that you have all these different media outlets that are talking just this much about Canada. Like, I get it. Look, I love it when I see Indian News and all these guys talking crap about Trudeau, but it's also extremely sad. Think about it. Canada doesn't do that for other countries. Canada doesn't focus on, wow, this crazy thing in Luxembourg is something that we have to really hyper focus on forever. It's just not a thing. Like, Canada focuses on Canada and America stuff because they're closely tied. But again, we don't care about the Italian prime minister. We don't care about France. We don't care about UK. Other countries are always talking shit about Canada. It's not a good sign, folks. That's not a good sign. Let me know down in the comments, mate, what you think about that clip. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Danielle Smith interview with Vashi and what she has to say about the tariffs. Here we go. What Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is talking about with the Canadian borders and how we need to address them.
Premier is today reacting to a massive trade threat coming from our largest trading partner. Incoming U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to slap 25% import tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods in his first day in office on January 20th. So far, it's just a threat with 2 months of runway for the feds to negotiate. But the threat alone was enough to sink the Canadian dollar to a 4-year low earlier today. The Prime Minister is set to meet virtually with Canada's premiers at about 5 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. Earlier, I spoke with Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, on the message she intends to bring to that call. Hi, Premier. Good to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
You're welcome, Vashi. Nice to see you.
Just before I got on air to do this interview, I saw a report from Reuters saying that U.S. sources were telling them that energy exports will not be exempt from this tariff that Donald Trump is threatening. Is that your understanding as well?
Look, he's saying it's a 25% tariff across the board, and he wants a few things addressed. He's talked about illegal migrants coming across the border. He's talked about the issue of fentanyl. He's talked about China using Mexico predominantly, but also Canada as a backdoor to start hollowing out their manufacturing sector. And he's talked about how we're not pulling our weight on defense and meeting our 2% NATO target. So I take him at his word that those are the things that he needs us to address if we're going to have constructive conversations about trade. And I would expect it would be across the board.
How big of an impact, in your view, if this does come to fruition, would it have on Alberta's economy?
Enormous. I mean, when you look at our cross-border trade with the United States, it's $188 billion in total, but the lion's share of that is oil and gas products going to the United States, going to the Gulf Coast refineries, which are tooled for exactly our type of heavy oil. It'd be incredibly damaging. You can well imagine that there would be other jurisdictions that might be able to fill that breach. I mean, we're hopeful that we could make the argument to the Americans that in order to meet their target of bringing down energy prices, that they should exempt oil and gas. But I can tell you, I take this president at his word. If he doesn't think that we're making movement on the things he cares about, then I think that we'd be facing the cross-the-board tariff.
When the last time we spoke, you had, I believe, spoken to a couple of people who are in and around that administration, not necessarily, in the past week or whatever, but prior to. If you are, is it your plan, I guess I should ask first, to reach out to those individuals like Doug Burgum, like Lighthizer, Robert Lighthizer, like who are you reaching out to? And is it your intention to ask for an exemption for energy exports, or to lobby for the exemption of all Canadian exports to the U.S.?
Well, my first step is working with the other premiers to get Justin Trudeau to the table, which thankfully Doug Ford has done. We're going to be meeting with the Prime Minister, and we'll all be able to share our collective concerns about what we're hearing. But I would say that the best thing that we could do would be to start hiring border patrol so that we can guarantee that we aren't having a free flow of drugs and illegal migrants across the border. We have to make sure that we're addressing the areas of Chinese using us as a backdoor to get into the United States and close those loopholes. It sounds like we've done a better job than Mexico, so I think we can make that case. And we've got to see the Prime Minister chart a pathway to meeting our defense targets, because if we cannot solve those things, all of the lobbying in the world is going to come for naught. We've got to address the issues that have been identified as pressure points and alleviate them.
Do you think, though, that the way in which it's being characterized by Donald Trump is justified? And I ask because I understand the pushback on defense targets, but there is one that has been set of 2032. If you look in a relative sense at migration and issues at the border, it is a tiny fraction, like 1% of what's happening at the Mexican border. Surely you wouldn't, you wouldn't be insinuating that Donald Trump is justified in doing this, are you?
Well, just saying we're not as bad as the other guys is not going to fly in this case. What I understand is that we've seen a doubling of the number of interactions at the border from people coming across, up to 200,000 a year now. That's significant. And when you're talking about a drug crisis that is not only hitting us but also hitting the Americans, they want to stop that flow of drugs. When you see that increasingly the open border policies of Justin Trudeau is leading to people coming to Canada as a staging area to enter into the United States to such a point that it has caught their attention, we need to address those issues. We can't downplay them, and we can't play the
Yeah, like this is a real thing. You've got people on TikTok. I think they're like East Indian people on TikTok that teach them how to communities, right? How to come to Canada under the LGBTQSLI plus, refugee status and all that crap, and then they go into America. They take the benefits here. They get their $76,000 a year, and then once that kind of runs out, then they hop the border and go to America. It's actual bananas. It's insane.
But game, and we can't pretend that the economic interests are going to override those very legitimate interests. We've got to make sure that we're addressing our own border issues so that can continue to be the longest unprotected border in the country. But I feel like that by identifying those issues, those are the ones that we've got to focus on.
Premier, look, I certainly understand the point about the problem getting worse at the border, and I've put that to Mr. LeBlanc on multiple occasions. But I don't think that the comparison to Mexico is but or superfluous, right? He is applying the same punitive treatment to both our countries when we just have a fraction. And when I say a fraction, I'm not like, being that's not in the abstract. It's I looked at the data, it's 1%, just over 1% of the migration that they're seeing at the southern border. If you're, in a position that you're in as Premier, as a representative of this country, harping on our country and our record and justifying Donald Trump's position, is that not detrimental to our overall effort to lobby him to exempt us?
Well, look, we have temporary work permits, 4.9 million of them coming up for expiry within the next 2 years. Does the Trudeau government even have a strategy at all for how they're going to be managing that? That's a lot of people. And if you look at it from the Americans' perspective, they would fully expect that people are going to be potentially coming across the border. That's why we have to demonstrate that we take our border control as seriously as the Americans do. I believe that if we try to change the subject without addressing the underlying irritants, we are not going to be successful, and we'll be facing 25% tariffs in 2 months' time. One of the things I would say is that he's given us 2 months' notice to clean things up and 2 months' notice to address these issues. And I that's what I'm going to argue at the table with the fellow premiers. Let's figure out a way that we can address those issues so we can get on to talking about our very fruitful and important trade relationship.
And I do take your point on the issues as they exist, but just to be clear, are you saying that his threat is justified?
Look, I've been saying that we have a fentanyl crisis in our province, and that's why we've been throwing a ton of resources, not only policing resources, setting up new dedicated enforcement teams to shut down drug houses, to go after fentanyl dealers, and to be able to get to apprehend those who are on warrants. We've been addressing the issue of of overdoses for the last number of years to try to curb that problem. We have been raising the issue of the number of newcomers that we are now overflowing into Canada to a point where it's overflowing our ability to be able to absorb them. I have been talking about this for many, many months prior to the new administration coming in. These are issues, and we're not going to pretend that they are not issues. They are issues that are impacting Canadians just as much as the U.S. president sees that they're impacting his citizens as well. We have a common interest in addressing it. We have a common interest in trying to get a handle on our border issues, and a common interest in trying to get a handle on the organized crime that is bringing fentanyl onto our streets. And if we can work together on a common interest, we'll probably be able to have a very fruitful relationship with the Americans, as we always have.
But with all due respect, Premier, there was a point in time in which you were asking for immigration numbers to increase to support the growth that you wanted to see in Alberta. And again, I'll put to you, do you think it's helpful to say that Donald Trump, to insinuate rather, that Donald Trump is justified? I get that you think there are problems, but does that justify punishing our entire economy, imposing a 25% tariff? Can you not raise the specter of issues at the border without doing that?
Look, we are supportive of an immigration program that makes sense, that brings people in so that they have a job to go to, so that they can cultivate relationships, so that they can ultimately find a pathway to permanent citizenship. We shouldn't be a conduit for illegal immigration into the United States. No. That is not a tenable position to take. And the fact that that Justin Trudeau has allowed for some of these issues to get so out of control that it is now affecting our trade relationship, we've got to address the foundational issues. And we have seen this for some time. The premiers have been very concerned that without being able to match some of the concerns the Americans had, that this is exactly what would happen, is that we would end up facing tariffs as well. I think we have a window to be able to address it, to get back to the table, but we have to take seriously the issues that the Americans are raising, and we've got to address them.
Can't you say that that is the case, that those issues need to be taken seriously, and also say Donald Trump is not justified in threatening a 25% tariff on all of our exports?
Well, look, I'm going to put Alberta's interests forward, and our interests obviously mean having a zero tariffs on the border. And I would say that the fact if we could lead with energy and have Justin Trudeau take the emissions cap off, take the carbon tax off, and truly be a partner in energy security, I think that is a very strong bargaining position to have that would allow us to have the broader conversation about the trade flows. But what I'm hearing the administration say is that they don't even want to talk about those issues until we address these underlying problems. I think we have to have a dual track, but I don't think that we can be naive enough to think that we can just argue, well, we're not as bad as Mexico, therefore give us an exemption. That's not going to fly. We have to be realistic about what we're going to take to the table.
Premier, I'll leave it on that note. I appreciate your time as always. Thanks for making the time.
You bet. Thank you.
Next, we're going to take a look at Kevin O'Leary, who went on Fox News and CNN and talked absolute trash about Justin Trudeau. So in case you missed it, here's the clip.
The challenge with the Canadian situation is different than the Mexican. Trudeau is a really unpopular leader, and in the parliamentary system, he'll be getting whacked soon. It's the end game in the parliamentary system is so brutal. Look what happened in England just recently. It's about to happen to him. So that Trump will not be negotiating with Trudeau. He'll be dealing with a guy named Pierre Poilievre who will get majority mandate. I think Trump should invite him down to Mar-a-Lago now. I don't know what the protocol and all that is, but he'll be dealing with Pierre. He might as well.
He was much more ideologically aligned with Trump.
Well, here's what Poilievre has already said. I'm going to lift the ban on pipelines. I'm going to kill the carbon tax to be competitive with Texas. And I'm going to open all kinds of investment in Canada. That's Trump's kind of guy. So I know he talked to Trudeau last night, but Trudeau is checking out of Dodge.
I couldn't agree more. You know, there's something that Donald Trump does with world leaders. He respects when you have a bold leader that wants to do what's in the best interest of their country first. It sounds crazy, right? Why would you respect somebody that isn't looking after your best interest, but their own and their own people? Well, that's what leadership really is. And Trump admires that. I'm not saying he's going to bend a knee to Pierre Poilievre, or it's actually Poilievre, Mr. Kevin O'Leary for future reference, but he doesn't respect Justin Trudeau. That we know, that's very clear. In fact, most world leaders don't respect Justin Trudeau. And in fact, most Canadians don't respect Justin Trudeau. And so the end is near. He certainly hit the nail on the head there. So that's what he said on Fox. Now let's take a look at what he said on CNN, because it's not that different.
Trudeau is at the end of his time. It's a parliamentary system. He's hated by his own people. He's got a few months left. Trump will not be negotiating with him. He's gone. This is like the end of the parliamentary system, like Britain. A few months ago, they whacked their PM. Trudeau he's irrelevant. So now Trump should actually bring down the prime minister in waiting, a guy named Pierre Poilievre. He's much more in sync with Trump. He's going to lift the ban on pipelines, eradicate no more carbon tax, and investing back in Canada. People want to invest there. And he's concerned about the border, concerned about fentanyl. He should go down to Mar-a-Lago now. Trudeau, irrelevant. Doesn't matter.
I actually think that with all of these, the tariff news and giving Trudeau a deadline for 2 months, less than 2 months to, pull off securing our border, ending, all the drugs and stuff like that that's floating around the border, getting into America. I think that with that, Trudeau and the Liberals are going to be spinning their heads. Now is the time for Trump to invite Pierre down to Mar-a-Lago and to talk. That would be the final nail in the coffin. And to finalize things, we're going to do a little bit of a recap on what happened in this insane question period episode where Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre went toe-to-toe. Here you go.
Opposition. Just shows how out of control he's become. He can't stay on a subject. He brings up housing, so I agree. I just threw away my script and said, let's debate housing. So he now changes the subject back to his 2-month tax trick. Well, here's the trick, everyone. After the tax break runs out in February, they're going to
increase the
carbon
tax
on heat, housing, gas, and groceries, all as a part of a plan to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. So will he get himself under control, show some strength for a change, and call a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, every day I get up in this House, I talk about one thing and one thing only, Canadians, and how Canadians, how they are where to grow, how we're there to grow a stronger economy for Canadians with direct investments that will support them with free insulin, with dental care, with more spaces in childcare, all things that the Leader of the Opposition is voting against. Yes, we're investing in the most ambitious housing solution that this country has ever seen. Things that he didn't do when he was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister. We're going to continue to stand up and fight for Canadians while the Leader of Opposition gets up, pulls off his little performances, and fights against me.
Yeah, he's going to fight against you. You're a freaking idiot.
Said he was going to talk about one thing, and then he rambled on about 10 or 15 things, all things he hallucinates that one day he might do if only he were given another 9 years in office, Mr. Speaker. Instead of talking about his real record, which is that he doubled housing costs, he doubled food bank use, he doubled the debt, and now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Mr. Speaker, we need a prime minister who's in control of himself, so why doesn't he call a carbon tax election so we can get one?
Oh my goodness, man. Pierre is making Trudeau look like an absolute clown.
I'll say it again. The Canada carbon rebate puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians. But the Leader opposite wants to talk about one thing. He talks about food banks. Let's talk about the school food program. This is a program that sends federal dollars directly into school boards, directly to support delivering good food programs for kids. No bureaucracy, just investments in school food programs. The Conservative Leader voted against it, and worse, he forced his own MPs to vote against it, to stand up against their constituents and side with him instead of in Canadians who need help.
Put an L in the chat for Trudeau. That was lame. Here we go, Pierre.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No sense, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't agree more. Here we have the NDP claiming to have torn up their deal, their carbon tax coalition with the Prime Minister. But then they taped it back together when he promised a 2-month tax trick. Then, after taking credit for it, the NDP says they didn't know what was in it. Right. And now they're opposed to it. Mr. Speaker, these two leaders can't even figure out how to give away $6 billion properly. Isn't it time for a carbon tax election so that we can elect a common sense government?
Yeah. Look at that, man. The Bloc's ready. Conservatives are ready. All you need is 14 Liberal MPs.
Speaker, MPs are supposed to represent their constituents here in Ottawa, but the Conservative Party MPs are choosing to represent their leader back in their constituency. I know Canadians across the country, including in Conservative ridings, are looking forward to paying no taxes on meals in restaurants or on all groceries or on kids' clothes for the next few months. But the leader is making them vote against these measures to help Canadians. If Conservative MPs want to stand up for Canadians, they need to stand up against their leader.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians
Mr. Canadian.
to stand up and speak for themselves. The Prime Minister wants to lecture us about democracy. Then why don't we have a referendum? A referendum election where the choice will be the following. A tiny 2-month tax trick with the NDP Liberals, or a permanent axing of the carbon tax and axing the sales tax on new homes. Why not let Canadians decide now?
Let's go, man! Put some W's in the chat, folks.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, for the Leader of the Opposition to end the price on pollution would mean to end the Canada carbon rebate that comes to people's homes 4 times a year and delivers more money to middle-class Canadians than the price on pollution actually costs, while at the same time decreasing emissions. And in regards to housing, his failed housing proposal was to cut billions of dollars from cities across this country that they're investing in building housing. That would drive up property taxes for homeowners. That would make it harder to build homes. He has a proposal that is electorally interesting for him, but won't do anything for Canadians.
The truckers carried us during the blip, and then look how Trudeau treated the truckers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Electorally interesting. That's his condescending way of saying Canadians actually like my plan. Because Canadians have figured out that after 9 years of this weak Prime Minister, spending $80 billion on housing, with the result being the doubling of housing costs, that spending billions more won't make any difference. We're going to slash that bureaucracy and use the savings to axe the sales tax on Canadian homes. Why won't he let Canadians decide?
Yeah. The carbon tax is just a redistribution of wealth to the lowest common denominator.
In conservative ridings across the country are speaking up that the investments we're making in the housing accelerator is helping them cut red tape, increase densification, create more homes more quickly. And the plan the Conservative Party has put forward to remove those billions of dollars from municipalities, just as they're tackling the housing crisis, would harm Canadians. But the Leader of the Opposition doesn't care about harming Canadians. What he wants to do is gain power, and he'll do anything he can to do that. While we stay focused on Canadians, he's focused on himself.
Nah, man, Canada first.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has run a groundbreaking experiment. He's put billions of dollars in a sack and offered it to politicians, and the finding? They're willing to accept the money. A groundbreaking sociological study. He wants to give more money to local politicians who block home building. We want to use the same money to cut taxes for the people who buy homes and build homes. Why won't we allow Canadians to decide whether they want the money to go to the politicians or to the people in a carbon tax election?
Trudeau's housing plan is to slow down immigration. That's it.
Or at least the Conservative leader is true to form in that he would rather pick fights with everyone than actually deliver for Canadians. We know, as we saw during the pandemic, as we've seen through the inflation challenges, working together with the provinces, working together with municipalities to get things built for Canadians is what they want. What does the Leader of the Opposition do? He insults people, but then he also votes against direct money in Canadians' pockets, whether it's with investments in childcare or dental care, whether it's investments in taking the tax off of groceries for the next few months. These are things that he's standing against out of political self-interest.
That wraps things up, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to drop a like on the channel or on the video. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.